Our next speaker needs no introductions except for please welcome Dr. Cyril Wecht.
Thank you very much. We have a deadline, and whatever it is now that's been left to me, I certainly will abide by it. I'm pleased to have given the time to some of my colleagues. As a matter of fact, I remember a debate once with William Buckley on television, and it came time for him to have rebuttal. And he sat back, folded his hands across his abdomen, and said, "You know, I think I'll just take the time to sit here and reflect upon what I said earlier. I'd like to take, I'd just like to sit back for the next 15 minutes, whatever I have left, and reflect upon what Wallace and David and Gary and David Mantic and Roger Feynman have presented. It's been outstanding. Let me try in the minutes that I have left to me to cover some points, and if I get some of the slides, fine. There's so much. Dr. Lendenberg said he's looking for a quest for a consensus. I want to point out to you that at every national poll that has ever been taken, going back more than 25 years in the United States of America, and those that have been taken abroad, we've had a consensus. He also talks about, makes big things about fees and honoraria, and saw to it that in the GM article, which was published, they rejected. They told me to take it down to 500 words. There have been other letters to the editor, Dr. Lendenberg, that have been in excess of 500 words. I was told if I had one word over 500, it would not be published. At the end of my article, it was put down that I had received a stipend for my work as a technical advisor on JFK. I get $3,500 for going away for one day and staying overnight. I'll tell you this, I got one hell of a lot less than that for the work that I did on the movie. What has money got to do with it? I hope that Dr. Latimer has made and will make $1 million on his books. I hope that Dr. West makes a lot of money on his video. They're entitled to it. What's the problem? What's the problem? So the fact, though, that it's put in for me that I made a stipend. He said Dr. Humes was not a fully trained forensic pathologist. Come on, Dr. Lundberg. He wasn't a trained forensic pathologist from day one. He never spent one single day in a forensic pathology training program. Dr. Lundberg, a pathologist, knows that. Dr. Lundberg was an academic pathologist before he became editor of JAMA. Look at the HSCA testimony when Humes had to look into the eyes of the forensic pathologists and knew that he could not bullshit them, and see what he said. He had not done medical legal autopsies. Let's not obfuscate that issue. Russell Fisher, trust him with your life? Well, I trained in Baltimore. I won't get into that, whether I trust him with my life. But let's look at something that is tangible. Fisher and others go in, the Ramsey Clark panel, which we came to learn about years later, they knew 4 or 5 years before I disclosed it to Fred Graham of the New York Times in August of '72 that the brain was missing, the microscopic autopsy tissue slides, the paraffin blocks, codochromes of the internal chest wounds were missing. These men who testified in court in murder cases all the time never said a word about the missing evidence. You talk about integrity? You want me to tell you what Russell Fisher would have said to Attorney Brown, who came to him and said, hey, I want you to testify in a murder case that has to do with gunshot wounds to the head? We don't have the brain, Doc, and that's not around. We don't have the tissue slides. Russell would have said, goodbye. Yeah, he had integrity. In this case, somehow, it seemed to have left him. Dr. Lundberg made references to various pathologists about how they all agree, and Dr. Petty, the top forensic pathologist in the world, well, I don't want to get into a urinating contest, especially in the presence of a specialist in urology, Dr. Latimer, as to who is the top forensic pathologist in the world. There are a couple or a few dozen forensic pathologists in America who would disagree with that. And insofar as what do pathologists around the world say, I'm not conducting a survey, but let me tell you, man, I have lectured on this subject by invitation in Australia, South Africa, London, China, Israel, and a dozen other countries, and dozens others not by invitation, but as part of a program. I know what they feel. They feel that the Warren Commission report is the biggest bunch of nonsense that's ever been perpetrated in the field of forensic science. That's what they feel all around the world. Dr. Lundberg said they did interviews with all the pathologists and all the doctors at Parkland. He mentioned them, and they were published, I think his exact words, in 21 pages of journalism. Tell me, Dr. Lundberg, when your man Dennis Brio went to Dallas, did he interview Dr. Charles Crenshaw? What kind of journalism was that? When you stated in your publication that Dr. Crenshaw had not been present at Parkland Hospital that day, that there had not been a call, heavens no, there was no call from somebody who said he was LBJ. Charles Crenshaw was ridiculed, held out for obloquy in the eyes and minds of 350,000, 400,000 physicians in America. That man was defamed. It's a matter of record that he was there at Parkland Hospital, and it's a matter of sworn testimony by at least 2 people that a call came in from somebody who said he was LBJ. But Dr. Crenshaw was not interviewed for JAMA, although Mr. Brio was in Dallas. I guess Fort Worth was too far away. Dr. Lundberg stated the point of entrance on the back of the head, it makes no difference. Did I hear that? Yes. On the Larry King show last year, he also said to me when it came up that the single bullet theory was something he had not addressed. Already in the May 27th edition, he had laid it out. He had a big press conference in advance of the journal reaching people, something that I don't know if has ever been done before. But he hadn't even addressed the single bullet theory. Now he tells us that it makes no difference. I leave it to you. Here, yellow is parietal. Blue is occipital. Does it make a difference? Are you standing up there? Are you shooting from there? Are you shooting from a whatever? Does it make a difference? It doesn't make any difference. My God, thank God that Dr. Lundberg is now with JAMA, because I would hate to see him testify in a murder case and have his rear end torn apart by F. Lee Bailey on cross-examination if he ever made a statement like that in a case involving death due to gunshot wound to the head. Makes no difference. One of the reasons it makes no difference is about 6 of the doctors down there at the time testified they saw cerebellum. My friends, here, cerebrum, cerebellum, they look different. They look very different. To say that people, including a neurosurgeon, did not know what the hell he was talking about when he said cerebellum, to tell me as a pathologist that I can't tell the difference between the uterus and the liver? This is the way they casually dismiss it. Whatever is needed for a given moment in time. It's like $3.99, wherever its final point of resting needs to be. The night of the autopsy from Kennedy's back, the next day from Kennedy's neck, 5 months later under the cockamamie single bullet theory from Connolly's left thigh. Whatever you need, man, whatever you need. Down, high, low, up. Humes, Boswell, think. What did they tell us? Got a hole at the back of the head, right? EOP, to the right of the midline, slightly above EOP. Right? Clark Panel tells us later, 4 inches higher. Here's down here, and here's up here. Dr. Lundberg says it doesn't make any difference. Dr. Lundberg publishes in JAMA that these guys have now given indisputable proof. They had the EOP wound then. They capitulated and bowed under the heavy pressure, the hammering they received from my forensic pathology panelists in the HSCA deliberations, and they said, well, okay, if you guys say it's up there, it's up there. Now they publish in May 27 and October 7th, Pierre Fink, Dr. Lundberg, it's got back down to the EOP. Which is it, Dr. Lundberg? Ask your colleagues, Humes and Boswell. I don't know. You're right. I wasn't there. Tell me. But you sure as hell are not going to walk away from here with 2 entrance wounds in the back of the head. Before you leave here, tell me which one you opt for. Your buddies, Humes and Boswell, the men you would trust with your life down at the EOP, or the experts up above 4 inches higher. Which is it? It can't be both. Publication of materials. I'll tell you, I counted 40 pages. 40 pages. 3.5 are given to letters to the editor of a con Nature. 5 back on October 7th, and then mine, the March 24th, 31st edition. I should be very, very complimented. Dr. Lundberg put it to rest on October 7th. He said that was the final word. JAMA had addressed it. My 500th word. My stinking little 500-word letter in this latest edition opened the door to 3 new articles by Dr. Artwell, Dr. Latimer, and Dr. Petty. Tell me, Dr. Lundberg, when were those 3 articles solicited, before or after? How come you can't give any space to Aguilar and Mantic and people with credentials like that? Wait, Dr. Latimer. Dr. Latimer referred to John Nichols in his visit. To borrow the phrase, and believe it or not, Dr. Lundberg, I was going to use it, and all I got to say, I'll attribute the great line from Lloyd Benson. I knew John Nichols, and I sure as hell knew John Nichols. John Nichols repeated the experiment from Edgewood Army Arsenal, shooting the bullets into cotton wadding, shooting the bullets through goat carcasses to break one fracture to simulate Conley's rib fracture, shooting through human cadavers to simulate the radial fracture. John Nichols got the same results that Edgewood Army Arsenal got. Those bullets are all substantially deformed and fragmented. And that experiment will not be repeated. I begged, I implored, I offered to pay myself as a member of the HSCA panel, repeat the experiment. They will not repeat it. The only one who does these experiments somewhere in the middle of the night, in the middle of nowhere with his family, is Dr. Latimer. He does experiments everywhere. Everywhere he does experiments. It's fantastic. What the hell do they need anybody for? Olivier Stardivant, any of these people, Edgewood Army Arsenal. Dr. Latimer was their man. It is absolutely incredible. Shooting fish in a barrel, he says. I'm waiting to find out then how come he misses the car completely. What a schmuck. I mean, it is right there. The car right in front of him is getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Shoot, man, shoot! I missed the car. The next 2, I better get in. My God, they'll take away my scores from the U.S. Marines retroactively. Dr. Artwell, Dr. West, they talk about the transverse process being hit and fractured, and the spinal cord is deflected, and if it's deflected, that means that the bullet must be deflected to the... Where does this come from? Not from the panel. You know, I disagreed with these guys, but they were 8 sharp, experienced forensic pathologists. Dr. Artwell stands here and says that he, I think his exact words, that he is bothered or disturbed or angry. He gets upset every time he sees Dr. Bodden's disruption. I know, Dr. Bodden. You are not Dr. Bodden. When Michael Bodden has forgotten about forensic pathology, you won't know for the rest of your life. You're upset about what he presents. He's my dear friend. I should be upset about what he presents. But we can disagree on the conclusions. At least Michael had the integrity, and the others did, to rip Humes and Boswell apart for this horrible, horrible autopsy. And Dr. Lundberg, who does know, who is a competent pathologist, who knows very well in his mind and his heart, who has written on this, who has editorialized, who has talked about the need and the importance of autopsies, he knows what a crummy job it was. And yet he says, in one of the slides, and I guess I don't have time, he says that these people did a fine autopsy. It was all that was necessary for this autopsy, despite the fact that it was on an extraordinary man under extraordinary circumstances. I want to tell you something. If they did autopsies like that in any approved medical legal office in the United States of America, their certification would be lifted so fast by the American Board of Pathology, the heads would spin, and you know who would be the first to agree with them? Dr. Lundberg. But this case is different, right? This case is different. Dr. West, I know Richard Thornburg. Worked with him when he was in Pittsburgh. Personal friend, U.S. Attorney. Richard Thornburg has enough problems. Don't give him that reflex. Please, please, please. Well, I give the honorable to Doug Carlson's guest and heed my time. There are a lot of slides. There's so much to say. On the thigh wound, Dr. Latimer, this is priceless. Dr. Latimer talks about, all they talk about how they were skeptics. All were skeptics going in. I know that's true with Dr. Artwell because I've seen some of the things that have been given to me, what he had said in Prodigy, and he has a right to change his mind. So I know it's true that he started off feeling differently. He was one of us. But here's from Dr. Latimer. He says that he didn't know how he felt going in, right? March 13th, 1970, Medical World News. He didn't get into the archives yet. March 13th, 1970, Medical World News. You ready for this quote? Quote from Latimer. Oswald showed what the educated, modern-day, traitorous guerrilla can do among his own people, working with religious-type conviction, willing to lay down his own life, but proposing to kill as many anti-communists as possible. Oswald was devious, skilled at his business, and amazingly cool. That certainly are the words. Those are the words of a skeptic, right? Of a man who has not yet arrived at any opinion. And then we've got these bullets. Bullets that are tumbling, and they're tumbling, and they're tumbling. We got a hole in the neck that they measured. One doctor there said 5 millimeters. Another one said 7 to 8 millimeters. They got it tumbling through the neck. And yet they talk about, in the next breath, the keyhole configuration of a tumbling bullet. What kind of a keyhole was that? Whose house? A dollhouse. Where? What are you talking about? Then they talk about keeps tumbling and tumbling. And they talks about Dr. Petty being the top forensic pathologist. Dr. Petty still talks about a bullet going around the rib. It's doing circles like a merry-go-round. It doesn't go through Connolly's chest. Forget that the lung was punctured. Forget the 10 centimeters of the rib were blown out. He's got the bullet going around. And then somehow there's, hey, I've had enough inside the chest. Let me out already. So somehow it just blows out and it comes out the chest. That's Dr. Petty's. And then on it tumbles. And here we have from Dr. George Shires, professor of surgery, chairman of the department of surgery at Southwestern Medical School, who took care of Connolly's thigh wound. There was a 1 centimeter punctate missile wound over the juncture of the middle and lower thirds, medial aspect of the left thigh. X-rays of the thigh and leg revealed a bullet fragment which was embedded in the body of the femur and the distal third. Now that's from the surgeon. It's casually dismissed today. I think it was Dr. West and others. Well, the fragment is not down there. The fragment is there, whether it's embedded, as they said, or right in juxtaposition to it. And this business, he says, well, it only went in 1.5 inches, it fell out. You know, I am not. You've never heard me talk disdainfully. I can't, because too many of my close friends and critics are non-MDs, and they've done an absolutely incredible job. So you don't have to be an MD, you don't have to be a forensic pathologist to talk about this, but know something if you're going to get into these things. A bullet that goes in 1.5 inches that has an overlying hole of an aperture of 4, 5, 6 millimeters, 1 centimeter. What is this business about bullets plopping out? I've never seen it in 12,000 autopsies, in 25,000 other autopsies that I have reviewed. Where the hell does this come from? That a bullet goes down and then all of a sudden it gets pushed out again. This is a continuation of the Humes-Boswell fake nonsense from the night of the autopsy, that external cardiac massage to the left side of the president's chest forced the bullet that had gone into his back out through the same hole when they learned about the bullet having been found on the stretcher and reported at Parkland Hospital by Tomlinson to the FBI. And the next day, when they learned about the bullet hole in the neck, that hole then represented the bullet wounded exit. The bullet moving 2,000 feet per second, coming out, hitting his starched collar and stopping dead in his tracks. And now it was from the front of his clothing. And then 5 months later, it was from Connolly's left thigh. And as Dr. West tells us, within 1.5 inches. I know we got the 1.5 inch measurement. I've never seen that. But I'll take 1.5 inches, Dr. West. Good enough. Tell me how it comes back out through a 1 centimeter hole. I have never seen it. And the shearing effect, oh, what an amazing coincidence. 6.5 millimeters in diameter, circular piece of metal, which Humes and Boswell, these men of known repute and integrity and competence, and Ebersol never saw. Right there at the cowlick. At the cowlick, they never saw it. And it magically appears some years later. Isn't that priceless? My friends, we've lost 2 bright, intelligent people to the other side, Dr. Artwell and Dr. McCosey, but we've gained thousands. You continue to talk, you continue to present the facts, and we will be marching by the tens of thousands, and we shall learn the truth in the years ahead in our lifetimes, I guarantee it.
I think I know how Bill and Gail Newman felt when they wanted to instinctively duck from what was going around them, because I don't want to be up here right now.